So today we're going to wing off what we did last week, which was a lot of the eucerines. I'm going to talk about Florilegus, which is an obscure species and group, and then talk about lookalikes, which would be Anthophora and the Melitoma and Ptilothrix genera. So let's start with Anthophora. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. And we'll go first to the B genera memorization thing. At some point, we'll probably go back to Discover Life just to give people a refresher. But really, as I pointed out, you just want to memorize what's in here and what are the core identification strings for each of the genera. So if we look here at the female, we're going to see a female Anthophora first. So in general, they're larger than honeybees. They tend to be a midsummer species. They can start fairly early in the spring, depends on the species. We'll be looking at an introduced one, Anthophora villisula, and it comes out quite early. But a lot of them are more mid-spring to midsummer species. The vertex, like the eucerines, are flattened. The key character that we're going to look at is the relative lack of hairs, almost complete lack in some cases of hairs in the internal cells of the front wing. We'll see that next, actually. And we will get into a little bit more of the wing architecture because that's how you're going to separate the Anthophora from the other one that in the east is Habropoda. Separate those two out. So let's jump to the microscope now. And females, at least the ones that I'm familiar with, all have dark faces, and we'll see that the males have quite a bit of pale or yellow markings on their faces. So what we're looking at is the front wing. This is the leading edge here. We've got the marginal cell. The wingtip was going to be out there. We're looking at the three submarginals. They all have three submarginal cells. In Anthophora, as versus Habropoda, the is it the recurrent vein? I forget. It's this vein here. Plunks right down in about the middle of the second submarginal cell. So first, second, third. And another general sign is the general equalness of in the third submarginal of the upper, remember we're upside down right now, the upper edge and the lower edge. It's not obviously perfect, but as you'll see in the other, for Habropoda, it's nicked down quite a bit up here. There is for example, if you look at McGinley's check guide, they'll often talk about the distance between the distance of the marginal cell and that marginal cell to the tip of the wing. And I find that not as useful because sometimes you are more guessing. This is the key here, I think, which would be the relatively clear of hairs, internal cells all throughout here. But you can see, of course, there are hairs. So these are hairs right here. So it's not an absolute thing. But as we'll see with Florilegus, which is a eucerine, they have a uniform blanket of hair. So there might be a few, but mostly it's lacking hairs here. So that's very clear, separates out tons of species. They all can look relatively similar in terms of eucerines and Anthophora, and they have a vague bumblebee look to them too. But when you get down to this, it's this clear internal cells, and for Anthophora, it's boom, that recurrent vein was landing right in the middle of the second submarginal. And there's several other characters that will separate out, including visual ones, from Habropoda, but we'll concentrate on these. So
also point out that many centrists also lack hairs in these cells.
Oh, good point. So we will come into centrus. There's some more of the ones that I don't see very often that we'll have to come. We'll address, and I'll do some learning at the same time because it's just not something I have memorized. So yeah, there's things like Anthophora, centrus, diadasia that we will ultimately get into also. But thanks, Tim, and anyone else who has any of these other observations, particularly for Western groups, sometimes Midwestern, but mostly Western groups where I'm not really addressing some of the ID issues there, or it could be worldwide. Throw that into the chat. I mean, we're all in it together, and so it's very useful, at least for a few people, to hear about the differences within your world of bees if you're not in the East, and also to correct me if you're in the East too. And that additionally, we hope to continue this for quite a long time, and we'll try and bring it to other parts of the world to continue these talks after we've finished, which will be probably at least a year. Okay.
Wait, before we go on,
yeah.
Can we just take another moment to clarify the relationship between submarginal cells and the other one, which I think might mean either the stigma or the marginal cell?
Okay, so tip of the wing is out here somewhere, and I'll back this off so we can visualize it. So here is the margin, and you'll notice here that the apex is away from the margin. So that's a character that we had to look at in different times. So this case, I'm just illustrating that this is quite a distance away from the margin, not on the margin like some species. Not that important, I think, in terms of knowing what this is by memorizing general characters. Marginal cell here. Note how tiny the stigma is. So that's a characteristic, I think, of Eucerines too. I don't look at this very often. It's not something that I think about. I believe it is in the guide, but this is the stigma, which is quite small compared to Andrena, for example. The stigma, in a lot of cases, is just not used much as an ID tool, but you'll notice its tininess. This then would be towards the base of the wing. Here's the 3 submarginal cells. So near the marginal, I think sub in Latin means near rather than below. And although you could think of it below. So here they are, 1, 2, and 3 submarginal cells. I'm going to call this the recurrent vein, although I could be wrong. Someone please correct me if that's not the recurrent vein. It is the thing that I look at, though, and I don't often put a name on it in my head. Here's these papillate bumps that are on the outer margin of the wing. So I'm going to back out now so you can see the wing in totality. And I want to say that the distance of this marginal cell is less than this distance from the tip to there, and that in Habropoda, we will maybe see that that is not the case, where this distance is about the same as the distance to the tip. I don't use that character, and you don't see it in the genus Genera scripts or Genera shortcuts, but I believe that could be a thing. Let's look at that when we get to Habropoda.
Okay. We have we believe it's the first recurrent vein.
Okay.
Excuse me.
This is the first recurrent vein then, right?
That is the report we have, and I haven't double checked. I don't look at them that often.
It's good.
And Heloise, this would be an opportunity for you to unmute to clarify if we have helped you out there. Give you a second.
I'm going to change the view as we go along. We can come back if we need to.
Tess, hi. I don't understand.
It's a good comment from Mary. It's more the relationship between the second submarginal cell and the vein that joins it in the middle, making a pentagon. That is formed because the vein comes in at the midpoint of the cell. So thank you for that great explanation.
Oh, I like the pentagon. And now I've not thought of it. I just think of it as joining in the middle. But yes, making a pentagon. Let's add that up. There's the vibe. This is the introduced species. they can be quite variable, but the size and shape is about the same. I'm going to jump to a male.
Eloise, I just saw that you were unmuted and we interrupted you. So here you go. Here's your stage.
Oh, I think it's been explained. As long as I can just see that first recurrent vein and the pentagon, so I can, know what I'm looking at.
I'm unmuted, but we don't hear you. Sam, is your speaker off?
Yes. Okay.
Hey, we hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, got it. Sorry.
Tessa, can I just see where that recurrent vein reaches the second submarginal cell? I want a picture in my head, if that's possible.
Yeah. I've got a male and it's the same thing. So let's see if we can find it in a different wing.
Thank you.
So yeah, anytime. All right. And males are often full of other features like modified tarsi, for example, that are species specific. It's not, it's just a note that they often come with modifications. All right, I need to maybe alter this a little bit. Got a lot of reflection, but I think I can tame that here. Let's jump up a little bit more. And we'll look at for the pentagon and the recurrent vein join in this specimen. Okay, we got some reflections, but it's good to always see a different specimen. In this case, it's just the male of the same. And I'm going to play here a little bit with some of the shading and maybe just moving lights around. Oops. All right. So, I don't like this lighting in the area that we're going to be working on. I think I'm going to tip the specimen a little bit more forward. Take that down. Oops. There's been attempts to do this with AI, but it's not been successful to date at the level of where it's useful. Like if you put together a few specimens, it can tell them apart. But here we go.
Oh, there we go.
Here we go. Okay. All right. So again, edge of the wing, tip of the wing is out here. This is a male Anthophora bilasula. This is the marginal cell. The very small stigma is in there. This is submarginal cell 1, 2, and 3. You can see very few to no hairs throughout here. There's always seems to be a little patch there of hairs, but as you'll see in the eucerines, they almost always have a uniform blanket of hair. So it's really maybe not absolute absence. It's more about relatively few to none. Okay, and here's this pentagon shape. Nice call on that. I like that. This is the first recurrent vein coming up and joining about in the middle in this male too. So that's a good sign. We have approximately equal and the third marginal cells, tops and bottoms. This though, the lack of hairs and the recurrent vein going into there, and the look and feel of a Eucera groupy Anthophora group thing really will nail this for you. Okay, other parts of the world, there may be complications, right? So maybe other species groups, and really do encourage people to mention those other groups when they come up, and we have things like Melecta and Xeromelecta to talk about too, which are the parasitic members of these same operations. This is not an awesome lighting for this. Oh, that's a good idea. How about that? It doesn't do anything for us.
Next to it.
Yeah, how about that one? Oh, better. Yeah. But what I'd like you to see, and maybe we will pull a specimen later if we have it, is that there's a pattern of yellow in here. It varies by species, but it's often, it's just not going to show well, I don't think, because the hairs are matting over this male. In the males, you have a lot of yellow involved in there, and it forms, rarely is it, I don't even think ever, maybe it's a uniformly yellow like you might get in a Melisodes. It's in a patterned way. So we may revisit that. The male, of course, has, like we just saw, very similar patterns to its wings. If we look at the hind end of the male, we don't see the spines on T6 and 7 that were there in the userines. So it's just a plain old back end, very bumblebee-ish. And the last thing I'm going to show on this male for this Usura, I'm not going to show other species at this point. We will, of course, get into the different species at some point. But if we look at the, this is the often called the furry-footed this is species, or furry-footed Anthophora, I can't remember what they call it exactly. This was an introduced species, and it has a very different architecture of the middle leg here, the tarsal segments, and this. And if we find the right angle, this is just extra bonus stuff. There should be a interesting brush of hairs on. Yeah, so you can see that there. I'm not going to dwell on this because it's not that useful, but it's just kind of cool. It's a spreading species. Right now, it's throughout the mid-Atlantic. It has the potential for being everywhere to being at least on the West Coast in sections, Pacific Northwest, and moving north and south. We'll see how far it goes. But it's abundant, nests under people's decks and other kinds of spots in urban areas.
2 questions. I love those little fuzzy legs. Those are very cute. Anthophora bimaculata, females in European species, have yellow on the face, but is it reduced in comparison to the male? No, but it is reduced.
Oh, okay.
The males also have a pretty uniform coverage of yellow. So. That is
good to know, and I don't believe that case in North American species. I don't know that any, I could be wrong, any of the females have yellow on their face. But again, there's a lot of Western ones that I'm very unfamiliar with, and Michael Orr did a nice revision of those. So someone can speak up if that's the case. Okay, I'm going to put this one.
That participant, Eve,
yeah,
posted links in the chat. So that's nifty. I'll put those on the Teams. And then we want clarity on, can it be distinguished from Melisodes from the tegula?
Yes, it's oval, but easier will be the wings, which is in Melisodes, they're going to have super hairy wings. So there'll be tons of hairs throughout the internal cells of the wing. But they also have oval tegula. They don't have the D-shaped or flat on one side things that the so you can kind of see here. It's hard to see through the hairs, but it's oval, like almost all bees. The exceptions are almost always used in keys, but in this case, I would use the hairs and the lack of hairs in the wing cells. Okay, we've jumped to Habropoda, and Habropoda has a pretty distinct but facial characteristic. At least the one eastern species, Habropoda laboriosa, has this almost entirely white clypeus. And then it has markings, it's a little bit difficult to see here, that jag up the sides. of the compound eye and leaving black in the center. So that's a vibe character for the male. Now, if we get into ID string things, let's see if my recollection was correct on the, let's see if we can get some glare down on this little. Ooh, there's nothing there. I liked it when I could put my hand under and decrease the glare. I don't know.
Can you remind the class if you're
here we
working
go.
with a female or a male?
This is a male. So again, the female, which we'll see, has no markings on its face. Okay, so I'm doing the finger on, which I do a lot. So when I'm trying to look at wing venation under the microscope, I'm holding the specimen with my fingers, of course, and then I will often, if I'm having some problems because of glare, often, I will stick one of my free fingers underneath, like I'm doing now, to pop out. You can see it's quite useful sometimes to do that in terms of illuminating the wing. Okay, so orientation again. Let me focus that. All right, there's a tip of the wing, front edge, very small stigma again, because that group is like that. Here's the marginal cell. Now, if we look here, this length is about this length, right? So that's different from the Anthophora. But I find that you start second guessing, like, is it that long or is it just long? Like, what is about? So when you talk about something being equal to, it never is exactly equal. Like, this is never going to be exactly equal. That is only it's an impossible character, right? Because it is never exactly equal. So it's also then when you deal with a character that is using it's equal to, that's a bad character. Okay, you want something that's a lot bigger or a lot smaller. About equal is open to too many transgressions of interpretation. So anyway, but you could see where that character would come up with. That's about the same size, and the Anthophora was quite a bit longer here. This section was much longer than this one. But we have better characters, right? Here's that first recurrent vein again, and it's almost right at, sometimes I believe it is joining with this cross vein between the second and third submarginal. We're looking at this again for hairs, and there's basically none. There's probably a little patch here. If we were to focus that or zoom in a little bit better, we might see that indeed in that section there are probably some hairs again. But let me get my finger in the right place here and focus it. Additionally, this upper or the one on the marginal cell, this length is clearly a lot shorter than that. But again, we're in that the Anthophora had these being about equal. Okay, well, is that about equal? You know, you in the absence of comparative material, which is where everyone starts, you start second guessing them. But this is a much clearer identification marker. This recurrent vein is almost on top of the cross vein. And it is not pentangly, which will be my new term here. Thank you, guys. So that really takes care of Anthophora, not Anthophora, Habropoda, because we're going to see a female in a second, but they look almost exactly alike. So a lot of times you have to pay attention, particularly if you're looking at early spring stuff. If you're looking early in the spring, then until this Anthophora villisula was around, most of the time, early spring meant you probably had a Habropoda, because it tends to be a blueberry specialist, although again, we get into these specialty things. And so the literature would make you believe that it is totally a blueberry specialist, but people in Texas where this occurs, where apparently there are no blueberries, say, well, it's not. We find it on Cercis or redbud. So quite different family groups. So what's going on? There's another master's project for you. So I'm going to pull this one and go to the female, and it's going to look remarkably similar. We'll just have a repeat on the wing venation rules. So I'm going to take this off. The pattern here in terms of hair color and that is very, very similar to a couple species, particularly Anthophora abrupta, which is the most common Anthophora in big chunks of the East. They look almost exactly the same, but then you look at the wings to separate them out. The other Anthophora have different look and feel, species level have a different look and feel. Let's go and just check the wing out here on this female. And I will zoom up. Don't know if I can get the other one is very close to the body. Not a good shot at all. We're trying to see this. This is not going to show the tip of the, maybe I can put my finger in there. Oh, maybe. Okay, so this is folded over, so you're not going to see that well. First recurrent vein coming in here on this female, and it's just about at the same level of this cross vein, first, second, third. You can see there is some hair clearly there, but all these other cells are largely vacant of hair. If we were to look, this length is probably about the same length of from here to the tip, which is folded over so we can't see it. And I think that will do Habropoda for us. That away.
We're moving pretty quick. Just checking to make sure that no questions are slipping by in the chat.
All right, I'm going to jump now back to the Eucera group, Eucerini group, which will be a good contrast to just what we were looking at. So this is Florilegus. I don't know what other Florilegus species are around. I believe there are, but it's a relatively uncommon group. And the eastern Florilegus, which also occurs in the Midwest, is a pickerelweed specialist. You essentially only find it on or near pickerelweed. So we've picked them up in bull traps that are not immediately adjacent to pickerelweed, but there is pickerelweed in the region. Let me point out that the
question.
Yeah.
Somebody just unmuted themselves. I didn't catch it, but was that intentional? Do you have a question? All right. Well, if it was intentional, just interrupt Sam at your leisure.
Okay. All right. So actually the best character is just something that works in the East and is probably not a universal. We'll talk about some other things. It's a relatively tricky one to key out. And so at least in the females, not so much in the males, but
what species are, what genus are we on?
Florilegus.
Florilegus.
This is Florilegus condignus, the pickerelweed bee, I suppose. Although there's other species of pickerelweed species. But see these white bands with big cuts, a shortcut, and a longer one. Often when this tergite is retracted, it looks like a gap and then another gap. That nails it, right? And then there's a little bit, it nails it when compared to, say, all the Melisodes in the region and things like that. In terms of just looking at, you can ID them in the field even from that pattern. And there's a slight metallic sheen, which is also characteristic, but you can't even see it very well here. But those are useful vibe characteristics. Now, let's look at the wing. and we'll just to get a portrait again of the hairiness of the internal cells. Oh, that's not a very good wing. Let's do the other one. And it might be the female will be better, but I think this will work. So we're going to look for in this species, we're going to look for hairs uniformly distributed throughout the internal. Oh gosh, there's the hind wing in front of where we want to see things. So in fact, it's exactly blocking. All right, let me flip to the other side again. Let me just look on the other. Yeah, the other specimen, I'm going to skip that on this one. The other specimen has a better wing shot. So Florilegus in the males has a very distinct S6. So we're looking at the sternites. So underneath the specimen, and you can see it pretty well here, although the three-dimensionality of it, I'll try and illustrate by changing the lighting. But what you're looking at is there's a raised area right down the middle, which none of the other Eucerini species groups has. So this is elevated, goes right down the middle of it. That is a sort of a, if you see that, you know, and it's Eucerine, you know that what you're looking at is the Florilegus. I don't know that. Well, let's change the lighting a little bit. You can't see how three-dimensional it is. I'm going to cock it to the side, I think. But it is a nice feature, raised line, and usually you would look at the back of the specimen and go, oh, that looks like a Florilegus specimen, and then you can confirm it with this raised line here on the male. Female does not have that and is looks different. The other thing the male has is that it has, like a lot, I think all the other Eucerines has some kind of tooth on the tergites. And it should only be, I don't know, let me see if I can change the lighting here. It should only, you can barely see it here. It's only on the 7th tergite. There's none on S6. So that eliminates at least Melisodes and probably a couple others, which I don't have memorized.
Where is the tooth?
Right here is the tooth.
Okay.
I'll zoom in.
Yeah, zoom in so I can get a screenshot.
And it's the same general place.
Gotcha. You
Right
had it a little
there.
bit sharper a second ago.
Okay.
There
we go.
Yep. And Laura, you can unmute.
And the tegula is oval in this one. And it's around picroid. So all those are good indicators of the species and genus. I am going to.
Well, we had a question.
Okay.
Laurel, did you want to unmute?
So, hello, thank you. So you mentioned that it had a projection on the male has a projection on the T7, but that's not written. I can't find that written on the memorization sheet.
Let me take a look.
Under Florilegus male, I didn't find that characteristic written in here, and I wondered if you could repeat it.
So it's not so. So when we talk about in the lingo of bees, we often don't talk about. We talk about projections as being something like a knob or a pointy thing coming out. This is more of a carina, which is a raised line. So it's,
so
I probably use sloppy language. Let's see what we say here.
So it says T7 with a projecting lateral tooth on far sides. So that was on the, you just showed us that. But
Saw that.
But the
here's
ventral surface, you mentioned that on the T7, I think, it has kind of a bump or a projection, and I can't find where that's written.
okay. Can people see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I've
I
highlighted it's we were looking at not T7, we were looking at S7, so on
S.
the underside,
Thank
and
you.
it's this raised median longitudinal ridge. So that's the thing I was showing on there. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
thank you. Sorry for interrupting. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
no, we want these kinds of things.
And if there's anybody, if you ever have like a different language that's easier for you, feel free to share it because it might, that different wording works for different people.
Right. We all, for example, last week, because some of you are already using a lot of species level guides and all kinds of things, is like Joan Malam got in contact with us and we modified the wording on a tricky to find character in the Melisodes guide. So we're always interested in that. And particularly, it may be, I just don't understand this. I can't figure out what you're trying to say, or you may actually have specific suggestions.
And we also just had a quick question. What was the approximate size of the Florilegus you were looking at?
Honeybee.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see them on these prickleweed. And with a pair of binoculars, you can actually ID them because of that back thing. Okay, I'm going to show the female, and actually we'll go up here. And so here we're looking at the memorization thing for females, and they don't have great characters that are just a give me. The pattern of hairs is good, but it's not something like another kind of Florilegus, which I'm not sure how many other species there are, may not have that. But here you see we're basically throwing it into that Eucerini group with the flattened head and the hairs on the wings. And then we get into a lot of details here, like the basitibial plate margin bare of all hairs. I don't know that I've mentioned that in any others. It's probably in the Discover Life guide. We'll take a look and see if the female, which I've got in my hands now, has that. Scopal hair simple. So when we talk about simple hairs, that means there's no side hairs. So I know, for example, Svastra and I think Melisodes, at least some of them have compound, maybe most have compound hair. So this one does not. And then we get really into the weeds by looking at the tip of the tongue, and it's got hooked hairs at the end, but it's often the case that you can't see the tongue. Okay, so let's look at, first of all, we'll see, I think we have a good chance of seeing the wing on this female here. Will be better. And we can see, we'll just confirm that it has a hairy wing in the cells. And so the forewing is partially blocking things, but if we dial up here more, oh, wait a minute. I'm looking at this is better. This is the other wing, but it's visible. So I'm going to dial slowly the magnification, and we're looking at it askance, but you can see that there are just hairs throughout those internal cells, quite a and relatively regularly placed. So quite a contrast with the ones we were just looking at, Anthophora and Habropoda. Okay, so that puts it in this pocket, not in the Anthophora pocket. Okay, so let's see so we can look at the back end here again. And my favorite character is just the way this thing looks in the field, which is a cutout, a short cutout at the bottom, and then the next one has a wider with this rim usually being down. Look, and you can see a little bit this metallic sheen too. That's quite visible. So if someone should mention if they want me to look at the scopal hairs, but otherwise I'm going to see if I can find the tegula, the basetarsal plate. So that comes into play in a couple situations, not very often. So it's worth looking at the plate and seeing if we can see this. So I think, and other people may have a different opinion of this, that the basatibial plate, which is sometimes not present in certain species, is sort of like the knee pad for species, and it's helping protect the joint as it goes in and out, maybe digging. I don't know any more than that, but that's what I think of it as. So if someone else knows more, speak up. Okay, so
bee's knees, you could say.
The bee's
That's
knees.
How I put it as well.
Yeah. All right, so here's the hind. This is the female. This is the hind leg. Here is the femur. Here's the tibia. This is the basatibial plate on here, and some of it, the upper part is covered with hairs. The lower part is bare. Presumably, other members of Eucerines have this all covered. I don't know. I don't use this character very much. So, but that's what we're looking at. And when you talk about basatibial plates, that's where you go. It's not a common character, but sometimes you need it. I'll just, since I'm right here, if we can see if I can change the lighting. Not really. I'll zoom in on the hairs on the
I don't know if that click really
tibia.
took.
Pardon? And we'll look at the simple hairs, but it's, pretty self-explanatory. So if we're looking in there, you can't see this, like it's not awesome because there are a lot of hairs, but there's no side branches on the hair, almost certainly because the pollen characteristics of the pickleweed don't like, or get gooped up or something. Maybe they're quite large. I'm not sure. I know that the hooked hairs on the tip of the tongue thing are, I don't know if you can see that, are a special, like you can't get the hairs. Can we see the tip of the tongue? I don't know if it goes, yeah, we can't really. Another time. The hooked hairs are required or make much more efficient the extraction of the pollen. And there's 3 other species of bees, or 2 other species of bees, Melisodes apicatus and Pseudopernergus nova angli, I think, that also are on this are pickleweed and also have hooked tips. Okay.
I think I have an old picture of the hooked tips. If it's not, there's not a picture on Discover Life, I will send that out.
Okay.
I think it was taken with an iPhone 6 though, so be kind.
All right, now we're going to jump to a couple genera that have only single members and are relatively easy to vibe out in the East in terms of their IDs. The first one, and probably some of these characters I'm going to talk about are universal. Let's see here if we can do this. So this is Melitoma toria. It's a morning glory bindweed specialist. It can sometimes be found on mallows, really long legs, relatively sparse. This is a male.
What's their name again?
Melitoma toria. In terms of, it's separated from the Anthophora and Melisodes group by a round top of the head, as is Ptilothrix. They're in the same group. Amphorini? I can't remember. But let's see if we can get that in focus. So instead of having, like Anthophora and Melisodes, a head that's relatively flat, so this perhaps is not super rounded, I guess, but it has a crowned head and it looks very round faced. the patterns on the, and we'll see another specimen here, the patterns of these bands of hair, which is not showing up super well here on this particular specimen, are pretty distinctive. They have two stripes near the top. And so often you can just look at it and know it's Melitomatoria. But
I'm going to try to show this
top
sputum a little better. I learned it as a smiley face.
The smiley. Oh, look at that. It is a smiley face. So there's your smiley face, sort of, you know, with the eyes and the things. Pretty distinct. The real distinct feature here, particularly after you've noted the rounded head, is the tongue. So the tongue in the male and female reaches to the abdomen. And so tongues are folded underneath the head, and there's a hypostomal cavity, which is just basically a slot underneath the head. And then in species like orchid bees and Melitoma, they'll carry that tongue, which is really long, even folded up, and it will run out to the abdomen. So here's that tongue. I didn't have a chance to pick these specimens, but usually this is very visible in any specimens if you fold it, because it can't retract it really. There's always going to be this tip of the tongue out somewhere, and it's super long. It never goes beyond the tip of the abdomen, but it's often into the center of the abdomen somewhere. So nothing else has a tongue that long.
Could we see a round face again?
Yeah, I'm going to get a different specimen and show that.
Also, let's try to find that wide share site. Amy, I will try to find, we have a lot of pictures taken. Sam has made resources in the past. You're making a PowerPoint. So I'll get that link and send it to you. So, you know, you don't have to recreate the wheel.
But if you do, we'll put a link to it.
Yeah, but if you do, please share.
Okay, so here's a female, and I think you can pretty well see the rounded head, or crowned head. I mean, it's not round as in absolutely the head is not round, but it is not flattened, and there's a clear crown / apex to the top of it. See if I can get some little bit. There, I think you can see it there as the thing fades in out. And the tongue on this one, this particular specimen, let's go to the side here and see if we can detect it. There's the smiley face look on the back. And let me bend the specimen over. This is a female, and it has relatively sparse scopal hairs, pollen-carrying hairs. That's why, if we look here at the bottom, this down here, it's kind of ratty, I would say. Sorry, Mr. Melitoma, but and loose compared to other species. But in contrast to the male, which that's basically all bare, it's pretty clear that that's the female from that. I'm looking for the tongue. I see it projecting here underneath, but I don't see it coming. They'll often come out underneath there. I don't see in this particular one. But the tongue and makes it an absolute, and the coloration, there we can see the tongue. The coloration is pretty distinct for this bee. They can often be in urban areas because at least some of the non-native bindweeds are acceptable. So here's the tongue running all the way down to the abdomen and hidden down there. Okay, we're running out of time, but we did talk about Ptilothrix before, but it's the other member in the east of these round-headed things. let me get one in there. So quickly, we'll take a look at that. We've got our basic round head again. This one is also a specialist. It's a mallow specialist, native mallows along marshes. So hibiscus are often what it's after. I call it the refuge bee because anytime we look in national wildlife refuges, we get a bunch of them, and they love bowl traps because there's almost always some kind of impoundment water feature that has hibiscus around it. This particular species, in addition to that round head and some other features, does not have a long tongue, but what it does have is no aurolium. It's also, this is Ptilothrix bombiformis, so it's very, sorry, let me pull this off, very bumblebee-like, but it doesn't have the official bumblebee character of no, sorry, I'm trying to turn this, it's not wanting turn, of no jugal lobe. It does have a jugal lobe on the wing. And what separates it out easily from lots of other groups is it's one of the few genera that has no aurolium. So the aurolium is
We
between.
seem to be frozen. Can you, I mean, I can see what's happening, but is that, we're getting a couple chats that you guys are still seeing Melitoma? Now it's okay?
Okay.
Okay. Do you want him to go back to the things that he was just saying about the round head and whatnot?
I can do that. Was I not, could people not hear me, or was it just the screen was frozen?
We have a couple of people saying it was fine and a couple of people saying it was frozen. So
okay, well, I'll go back to the head. So Melitoma, Ptilothrix looks like a bumblebee, very long legs. There is no pad between the tarsal claws. So here's the two tarsal claws, and they have lobes. This one has a lobe there and a shorter lobe there. It's difficult to see in a way, but there's nothing between the toes. There's no pad between the toes on this species. We've shown that in other sessions. Now, if we go back and look at the head, hopefully people are able to see this. You see the very crowned, rounded head, and face is also very round on this specimen, and the bumblebee coloration aspect. It's probably trying to mimic a bumblebee. And we'll take a upper level look here.
I was watching the chat and stuff. Did you mention that the bee, I wondered if the Jesus bee, because it can walk, it'll be seen walking across the puddle?
Yeah. I did not
or
mention
the spider bee. I also heard it as a spider bee.
Yeah, so they love hard packed soils. So you will see them on dikes around impoundments, and also on hard paths or just really nasty clay. And what they do is they will fly to the females will fly to a puddle, and they will float on top of the water on the surface tension. They're quite large bees, so they're well within the bumblebee size class. But somehow they can do this without breaking the surface tension, and then they wet their scopal hairs, bring that water back, soften the earth, and repeat. And they soften it in a way that, in addition to helping them dig out that the tunnel in that hard packed soil, they also make little turrets from that mud, and those have an official name called tumuli. And so if you ever run across that, little tiny turrets in July/August, it's almost guaranteed to be some Ptilothrix. They tend to aggregate together. They're not colonial in any way. I think we're about done with the basics here. Do we have any questions?
Now's a good time to let's know if you have questions, but I don't have anything in the queue right now. I interrupted you a lot today.
Okay. No, that was good.
Can you spell it out?
Pardon?
Ptilothrix, can you spell it?
Oh, it's interesting spelling. Ptilothrix. So yeah, there's a silent P on the front, just to trip us up. Wait, I'm gonna stop the screen then.
Okay.
That makes sense. And
Okay, well, we went through a bunch there. Anybody who joined us in the middle, I just want to check in again. I'll probably make this announcement for the next couple weeks. Anyone who's using this for academic resources, it's useful here. Yay! Please just get in touch with us. We'd love to have feedback on what's working for you. If there's any resources that you request from us, we'll try to accommodate those. We can't. This is not a certified course in any way, but we're here for you. And if you create any kind of material that you'd be willing to share, that would be super helpful for us as well. So let this go both ways. Sam, any closing thoughts?
nope.
All right, well, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to turn off the recording now, and we'll be here for another couple minutes while that